You can have a wedding anytime, Elena. This is my first baby. That's what my sister Sienna told me just 6 weeks before I walked down an aisle lined with 35 empty chairs. She said it with the casual tone of someone picking a brunch spot, as if my wedding day was just a minor scheduling conflict in her social calendar. So she booked her baby shower for the same day, the same hour, and one by one, my entire family followed her. Even my father, the man who promised to walk me home, chose finger sandwiches at a country club over his daughter's vows. 7 people showed up to my wedding, but 417 messages showed up the second they realized what they had missed. Before we dive into how the silence of those empty chairs turned into the loudest victory of my life, take a moment to like and subscribe if you believe family is about loyalty, not a price tag. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your location and local time in the comments. My name is Elena Brooks, and let me take you back to the moment the last thread of my family snapped. In the Vance family, there was one rule that was never written down but was practiced like a religion. Everything revolved around my older sister, Sienna. My father, Robert, spent 30 years as a middle manager at a regional bank, a man who lived for optics and respected nothing more than a high credit score. My mother, Margaret, was the architect of our family's perfect image, ensuring our colonial home in the suburbs looked like a page from a magazine. But from the inside, the math of our lives told a much darker story. 5 years ago, Sienna married Trent Sterling. The Sterlings didn't just have money, they had power. They owned a commercial real estate empire, and the moment Sienna said, "I do," she didn't just gain a husband, she bought my parents' loyalty. Trent paid the mortgage on my parents' house. He handed my mother a black credit card for her personal expenses. He funded the kitchen renovations and the luxury vacations. In exchange, my family treated Sienna like she was the sun, and they were merely planets lucky enough to be in her orbit. Sienna hadn't earned a paycheck in years, calling herself a socialite, but in our house, marrying rich was considered the highest form of achievement. And then there was me, Elena, the younger daughter who chose a starving artist life. I lived in a studio in New Haven with paint-stained floors and a second-hand couch, working as a freelance illustrator for children's books. To my family, my life was a hobby. When I met Julian Brooks, a contemporary realist painter, they didn't see his talent. They only saw that he didn't have a corner office. Some months, Julian and I ate a lot of pasta so we could afford high-quality oil paints, but we were building a life of substance. We were happy. The friction turned into a fire 6 months before our wedding, during Thanksgiving dinner. Sienna arrived in a brand-new luxury SUV, carrying 2 bottles of vintage wine that cost more than my monthly rent. I brought a pie I'd baked from scratch. My mother placed the wine on the table like it was a holy relic and didn't even acknowledge the pie. Over dinner, my father leaned toward Julian with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "So, Julian," he said, "when are you going to stop playing with brushes and get a real job to support my daughter?" Trent chuckled. Sienna tilted her head, her voice dripping with artificial pity. "Oh, Dad, leave them alone. At least Elena found someone who is comfortable with being average." Julian didn't snap. He just reached under the table and squeezed my hand. What they didn't know was that Julian was working on something massive, a commission that our quiet, silver-haired landlord, Arthur, had helped him secure. But in that room, we were just the poor relatives invited out of obligation. The real knife in the back came 3 weeks before our wedding date of June 14th. I had designs for a small, intimate ceremony in a salt marsh garden in Mystic, Connecticut. 42 guests, hand-painted invitations, wild flowers. I was in my studio when my Aunt Beatrice called. "Elena, honey, are you going to Sienna's shower at the country club, or are you just heading straight to the wedding after?" I froze. "What shower, Beatrice?" "The baby shower. It's on the 14th at noon in Greenwich. Everyone's talking about it. Didn't you get the invite?" I hung up and called Sienna immediately. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and rehearsed. "Oh, Elena, I was just about to call you. The venue Trent wanted only had June 14th available. It was a total nightmare, you know. But your wedding is in the afternoon, right? I'm sure people can just do both." She knew better. Greenwich and Mystic are over an hour apart on a good day. And a high-end baby shower doesn't just end in time for people to drive across the state. She had sent her invitations 2 weeks before I mailed my save the dates, even though I had told her my date months in advance. It was a surgical strike. Sienna, you're asking the family to choose, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. Elena, don't be so dramatic, she sighed. This is my first baby. It's a huge milestone. You can have a wedding any time, but a first grandchild only happens once. You understand, right? I called my mother. She gave me a silence that felt like a burial. Elena, Sienna really needs us there. It's a big deal for the Sterlings. Can't you just move your date back a week? The deposits are paid, Mom. The invitations are out. Well, she whispered, maybe not everyone needs to be at the wedding. I'm sure some of your little artist friends will be there. Finally, I called my father. He promised he would be there. He promised he'd walk me down the aisle. But as the days ticked down, the RSVPs started coming in. No, regretfully decline. Something came up. Out of 38 family members, 22 declined within 48 hours. Every single one of them was heading to the country club in Greenwich. I was being erased from my own family, one RSVP at a time. I realized then that I wasn't just competing with a baby shower. I was competing with the man who paid my father's mortgage. And in the Vance family, money always won. The morning of June 14th didn't feel like a wedding day. It felt like a funeral for the girl I used to be. I was sitting on my bathroom counter while my best friend, Maya, an ER nurse who had seen the best and worst of humanity, applied my makeup with the precision of a surgeon. My dress, a vintage lace find from a consignment shop that cost me $80, hung on the door. It was beautiful, ivory, and timeless, but it felt heavy with the weight of who wouldn't be there to see it. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. Elena, honey. I don't know how to say this, but the shower is running late. With the traffic from Greenwich to Mystic, we won't make it by 3 Juan. I'm so sorry, but you know how it is with Sienna's first baby. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen until the light dimmed and went black. 8 seconds of silence. That was the value of my entire life to the man who raised me. 8 seconds of digital text to cancel 28 years of being his daughter. He's not coming, is he? Maya asked softly. No, I replied, my voice as cold as stone. He's choosing finger sandwiches over his daughter's soul. I checked Instagram one last time, a mistake I'll never repeat. Sienna had already posted. A sea of pink peonies, gold-rimmed champagne flutes, and a group shot of my entire extended family. My mother was beaming. My father was holding a gift bag. The caption read, "So grateful to have the whole family here for this miracle. Family is everything." They were celebrating family while the youngest member of it was standing in a rented room, alone, wondering how she was going to walk down an aisle with no one to hold her hand. The venue was a small hidden gem in Mystic, a garden overlooking a salt marsh where the water turned to liquid silver in the afternoon sun. Julian had spent 2 weekends building the altar arch himself from salvaged oak, weaving it with eucalyptus and white ribbon. It was the most honest thing I had ever seen. I arrived at 2:15 p.m. The chairs were set up, 42 white linen chairs, each with a sprig of lavender tied to the back. From a distance, it looked like a dream. Up close, it was a ghost story. 7 people, that was the final count. Julian, Maya, 2 of Julian's friends from art school, 2 of my college roommates, and our landlord, Arthur. 7 people in a sea of 35 empty chairs. The wind moved through the vacant rows, rustling the lavender like a soft, mocking whisper of the people who chose to be elsewhere. I stood at the edge of the grass, my bouquet of peonies trembling in my hands. The string duo, 2 college students I'd hired, began to play Pachelbel's Canon. The music was beautiful, but it felt thin in such a large, empty space. I looked down the long aisle. Julian was at the other end, his eyes red, his jaw tight. He looked at me with so much love it hurt, but I could see the heartbreak for me reflecting in his gaze. I took a breath to start the long, lonely walk by myself. Then I heard a step behind me. Steady, deliberate. "I believe I'm a bit overdressed for a garden party," a voice said. I turned. It was Arthur. but it wasn't the Arthur I knew. The man in the old corduroy jacket who brought us tomatoes from his garden. He was wearing a navy three-piece suit that fit him like armor. It was clearly expensive, tailored with a timeless elegance. His silver hair was perfectly swept back, and his eyes, usually so soft, were burning with a fierce, protective intensity. "Arthur?" I whispered. "Your father should be here, Elena," he said, extending his arm with a formal grace. "But since he has chosen to be a small man today, I would be deeply honored if you would let a friend walk you to your future." In that moment, something broke open in my chest, not the sharp kind of breaking, but the kind where light finally gets in. I took his arm. He felt like a mountain, immovable and solid. As we walked, those 7 people stood up. They didn't just stand, they cheered. They made enough noise for 100 people. Arthur leaned in and whispered, "Look at Julian, only Julian. The chairs are empty, but the room is full of the only thing that matters." The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. We said our vows, mine written on the back of a sketch, Julian's written on a piece of primed canvas. We laughed through our tears. We kissed under an arch built by hand. And when the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, I realized that I had stopped looking at the empty seats. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the other daughter. I wasn't the struggling artist. I was a woman who was loved by people who actually showed up. But as the sun began to set over the marsh, Arthur leaned over to Julian and handed him a small embossed card. "Tomorrow, Julian, the gallery. It's time the world sees what I've seen in that studio of yours." I didn't know then that the Arthur who walked me down the aisle was the same Arthur Sterling who had discovered 3 of the greatest artists of the 20th century. And I didn't know that within 24 hours, the 417 people who ignored me were about to find out exactly how much my worthless husband's talent was actually worth. 3 weeks after the wedding, Julian and I were back in our New Haven studio, the air still smelling of lavender and turpentine. I had muted the family group chat the day after the wedding. I didn't need to see the photos of Sienna's gold-leafed nursery or hear my mother's excuses. I was focused on my work until Arthur knocked on our door. "Pack a bag," he said, a glint of steel in his eyes. "We're going to Manhattan." What followed was a whirlwind that felt like a movie montage. Arthur wasn't just a retired art guy. He was the Arthur Sterling of the legendary Sterling Vance Gallery. No relation to my family, though the irony wasn't lost on me. He had introduced Julian's portfolio to Harrison Thorne, a billionaire whose private collection was more exclusive than most national museums. Harrison didn't just buy one painting, he commissioned an entire series. The contract was for 12 original oils, a staggering $450,000 agreement that made my father's annual bank salary look like pocket change. But Harrison's generosity didn't stop there. "Julian, Elena," he said during a meeting in his glass-walled office overlooking Central Park, "the Meridian is docked in Monaco. I want you to spend 10 days on board. Consider it a late wedding gift and a chance for Julian to find some Mediterranean light." We flew to Nice, France, the following Tuesday. When we boarded the Meridian, a 180-foot floating masterpiece with marble baths and a private chef, I felt like a ghost who had accidentally wandered into heaven. For the first time in my life, I wasn't making myself smaller to fit into the corners of Sienna's life. I was breathing. On our last night in Monaco, as the sun dipped below the Mediterranean, turning the water into a sheet of crushed gold, Julian took a photo of me. I was standing at the bow in a white silk dress, a glass of vintage champagne in my hand. Behind me, the twinkling lights of the Monte Carlo skyline looked like a spilled jewelry box. On the table next to me was the newly printed catalog for Julian's upcoming solo exhibition at the Caldwell Gallery. I posted it. No tags, no long-winded captions, just, "Honeymoon with my husband, grateful for the people who showed up." I turned off my phone and went to dinner. I didn't check it until we landed back at JFK the next morning. The screen was a wall of white light. 417 missed calls and text messages. My father had called 23 times. "Elena, whose yacht is that? Why didn't you tell us Julian was doing this well? Call me back immediately." My mother, "Oh my God, Elena, is that Monaco? We are so happy for you, sweetheart. We need to throw a massive celebration dinner when you get back." The same woman who suggested I invite a few artist friends to my wedding because my family was too busy was now ready to roll out the red carpet. Sienna sent 3 messages. The first, "Wait, what?" The second, "Is Julian's art actually selling for that much?" And the third, sent at 3 a.m. "Elena, we need to talk. Trent is having some issues. Call me." But the most shocking was from Trent himself. The man who had mocked Julian for playing with brushes sent a formal text. "Elena, I understand Julian is being represented by Harrison Thorne's circle now. I'd love to connect and discuss some investment opportunities." They weren't worried about my happiness. They were panicked because the hierarchy had flipped. The struggling sister was now the one with the billionaire patron, while the sterling empire was beginning to crack. A week later, Julian's exhibition opened in New York. The centerpiece was a massive, luminous oil painting titled June 14th. It was a hyper-realistic rendering of our wedding garden. The 42 white chairs were there. The lavender sprigs were there. But the painting focused on the 35 empty seats, the sunlight hitting the vacant linen with a haunting, lonely beauty. Only 7 chairs held figures, Arthur, Maya, and our friends, painted with such warmth they practically glowed. The New York Times Arts section ran a feature on the show the next day. The headline read, "The Art of Absence. Julian Brooks transforms betrayal into a masterpiece." The article didn't hold back. It mentioned that the artist's own family had boycotted the wedding for a social event, leaving him and his bride to be walked down the aisle by their landlord. By noon, the story was viral. I was sitting in our new home, a cottage in Westport we'd paid for in cash, when my father called again. This time I answered. "Elena," he rasped. His voice sounded like it had been through a shredder. The article, "Everyone at the bank is asking me about the 42 chairs. They know, Elena. Everyone knows." "They only know because it happened, Dad," I said, my voice calm and steady. "We might lose the house," he whispered. "Trent's company filed for bankruptcy this morning. The mortgage, we can't pay it without him. We thought you could, since Julian is so successful now." I looked out at my garden, where the lavender I'd planted was finally starting to bloom. "Dad," I said, "6 months ago you told me I could have a wedding any time, but Sienna's party was a once-in-a-lifetime event. You chose finger sandwiches over me. Now I'm choosing my peace over your optics. I'll make sure you don't end up on the street, but I will never be your backup plan again." I hung up. I didn't feel angry. I felt light. Self-respect is the quietest form of revenge. You don't have to burn the house down. You just have to stop being the one who keeps the fire going while everyone else stays warm. I looked at the 417 messages one last time, then I hit delete all. The only people I needed to talk to were already in the room. The fallout from the New York Times article was like a slow-motion car crash for the Vance family. In the wealthy suburbs of Connecticut, reputation is everything, and overnight, Robert and Margaret Vance went from being the perfect parents to the cautionary tale of the town. People who had once sipped wine with them at the country club began to look away when they passed. The 35 empty chairs had become a public monument to their vanity. But while their social world was crumbling, their financial world was being demolished. Trent Sterling's bankruptcy wasn't just a corporate filing, it was a total wipeout. The luxury SUVs were repossessed, the designer jewelry was sold to consignment shops, and most importantly, the checks to my parents stopped. A month after we returned from the Mediterranean, my father drove out to our new cottage in Westport. He didn't call ahead. He just showed up, standing on my porch in a flannel shirt and khakis, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 weeks. He looked at our home, the house we bought with Julian's talent and my hard work, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Shame. "I didn't come to ask for money, Elena," he said, his voice cracking. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Then why are you here, Dad?" "I found this in the attic," he said, reaching into a weathered bag. He pulled out a framed certificate, a statewide art award I had won when I was 16. I had forgotten it even existed. He held it like it was made of glass. I realized I never put this on the wall. I put Trent's business awards up. I put Sienna's magazine covers up. But I left yours in a box. He looked at the garden, where the lavender was swaying in the breeze. I sat in that country club eating finger sandwiches while you were marrying the best man I've ever met. And I did it because I was afraid of losing a lifestyle I didn't even earn. I broke a promise to my daughter for a credit card that ended up getting declined anyway. It was the first honest thing he had said to me in a decade. I didn't hug him. I wasn't ready for that, but I invited him in for coffee. Inside, he saw a small study Julian had painted for the exhibition. It was a close-up of the seventh chair, Arthur's chair. My father stood in front of it for a long time. "He's a good man," he whispered. "He's the man who showed up," I replied. Sienna's apology came later, in the form of a handwritten letter. It wasn't perfect. She spent 3 pages blaming her hormones and the stress of the Sterlings, but buried in the final paragraph was a moment of raw truth. "I scheduled the shower on your day because I was terrified that if your wedding went well, people would finally see that you were the one with the real life, and I was just the one with the expensive things." I didn't reply to the letter, but I didn't throw it away. I put it in a drawer. Maybe in a few years I'll be ready to bridge that gap. But for now, the distance is my sanctuary. Julian and I are building a different kind of life now. One where the chairs at our table are always filled, but only by people who value the soul over the status. Arthur comes over every Sunday. Maya brings her husband. We eat outside, the sound of the ocean not far away, and we talk about art and life and the future. My parents still live in Glastonbury, but in a much smaller townhouse. Julian and I pay their utilities, not because we have to, but because we chose to be the people they weren't. We provided a safety net, but we took away the pedestal. We are no longer the supporting characters in their drama. We are the authors of our own. People often ask me if I regret the 35 empty chairs. My answer is always the same. No. Those empty seats were the greatest gift I ever received. They showed me exactly who was there for the socialite version of me, and who was there for the real me. They cleared the room so that the right people could finally be seen. Success isn't about the 417 messages. It's not about the Dutuyen in Monaco or the gallery openings. Success is the ability to look at your life and realize you no longer need to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. It's the quiet, steady peace of standing in a garden you built yourself, with a man who sees your light, and realizing that even if every chair stayed empty, you would still be enough. Because at the end of the day, you don't need a crowd to witness your vows. You just need the courage to walk toward the people who would never dream of missing the walk. Self-respect is the quietest, most powerful form of revenge. You don't need to burn bridges. You just need to stop crossing them for people who won't even meet you halfway. Remember, your value is never defined by those who fail to see it. If Elena's journey touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more life-changing stories. I have one question for you. Would you have answered those 417 calls? Let's talk in the comments below. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Until next time, stay strong and keep shining.